Hello and welcome back. In this video, we are going to continue what we have discussed on the previous video. So previously, we have discussed how to configure your HTTP element. We have learned how to send a request and then map the response and save the response to our custom variable. Now, what we're going to achieve is we need to post this inspirational code to our Facebook page. To do that, we need two APIs, the MMIO public API and Facebook public API. So these are the requirements to use that API. On the previous video, I have already shown you how to use Codable API. Now, to use Facebook API, we need two things. We need the page ID of our page, and we also need the access token of our page. Now, where do we get the page ID? We can get the page ID from our flow URL. I'm going to show it to you later. And for the page access token, this is where things get a little complicated. So because we are going to use another API, the MMIO public API, to get that access token. So that's why we need number 3, the MMIO API, in order for us to get the access token that we would need to fire or trigger the Facebook page API. The Facebook page API is needed to post a content to your Facebook page. Now, for the MMIO API to work, you would need to get your API key, which you can get from your account. Now, let's review before we actually do this. The page API is used to post your content, in this case, your code on your Facebook page. Now, to post, you would need your page ID and your access token. The page ID can be taken from your flow URL, and for the access token, we would need MMIO API to get that. And for MMIO API to work, we would need the API key of your MMIO account. Let's first get the essentials. We are going to get the API key of your MMIO account, because if we get the API key of your MMIO account, then we would be able to get your page access token. And after getting your MMIO account API key, we are then going to get your page ID from the flow. So let's do it. All right, we are now on your account's API access token. Now, to get here, simply go to My Account, and then Account Settings, and then click the API Access Token tab. Then you would be able to see your API Access Token. Now let's copy the API Access Token and visit the MMIO developer documentation. To go to the developer documentations, simply click on this link. Alright, we are now on the MMIO developer documentation. I'm going to show you what API we're going to use to get our access token. So go to Facebook pages and click here on the get data of a specific imported Facebook page. So once you are here, you'd be able to see the path that is needed and also the API server. So since we have the path and the API server, we can now use this as our request URL. Let's go back to our flow. And then we are going to add another HTTP request here. Next, let's configure this element. For the request URL, we can simply copy the API server and path that I showed you earlier. So go to the MMIO developer docs, copy the API server here, and paste it on your request URL. Next is we are going to copy the API path, which is this one, and paste it on your request URL. Great, we now have a valid request URL, but you might wonder why the URL that we pasted is not the same as the one that we copied from the developer docs. This is because the URL needs to be encoded properly. Please note that special characters except underscore and hyphen needs to be encoded properly. It means that the opening curly bracket that we see here will be transformed to this one, %7b, while the closing curly bracket that we see here will be transformed to %7D. Don't worry too much about this because this is going to be replaced with our page ID's actual value. Whenever you see on the developer docs that there is an opening and closing curly bracket, it means that this value is not literal. This value needs to be manually replaced with the value that is appropriate to this. In this case, the value that is appropriate is the page ID. You can easily get the page ID right in your Flow's URL. So if this is your Flow URL, you should be able to see the page ID here, and the value would be this one. So copy this value and replace the page ID here with the actual page ID. So notice that I replaced the whole value here from the %7B up to %7D. Again, the %7B and 7D were just a representation of the opening and curly brackets. That is why we started replacing the value from here. Now this is the correct request URL format. We have already replaced the arbitrary value, the page ID, with the actual page ID. The next step would be to modify our headers and add an authorization bearer access token. So not all API requires this, but specifically Marketing Master IO Public API requires that we add an authorization bearer access token in order for our request to be accepted by the server. So let's start configuring our headers by clicking the Headers tab, and on the header key, add authorization. After adding authorization on the header key, let's configure the header value by typing bearer. Then add a space. After adding a space, we are going to paste your MMIO's access token here. So to get your MMIO access token, go to My Account, Account Settings, and then click the API access token and copy this one. After copying, go back to your Flow and paste the access token that you just copied. To review, this is how to correctly configure your header. On the header key, add the authorization keyword. And after that, on the header value, add bearer, space, and then paste your API access token. Now, this next step here is very important. You need to click the Add button here, because if you do not click the Add button, then your headers will not be set. As you can see here, there are no custom headers set just yet, but if you click the Add button there, only then will your headers be registered on the HTTP request. Now that we have registered a valid header, we can now click the Send Test button here. So click Test Request, and after receiving the response, we are going to map the response here. Alright, we have received the response value here, and this value is what we need, the access token. So we are going to select this. What we need to do next is to add this value to a custom variable. But we haven't created a custom variable to accommodate this value yet. So we can just confirm the changes for now, and then let's create a custom variable. I'm gonna teach you a little hack to easily create a custom variable, because normally to create a custom variable, you would need to go to Facebook and Instagram, Chatbot Flow Builder, and then go to custom variables and then create a variable here. But using that hack, you would not have to go out of your Chatbot Flow. So let's try to edit our Chatbot Flow back again, and then let's create a custom variable right inside our flow. To do this, just right click and choose user input, and then on the user input, just create a new variable here, and then we are going to name this as page access token. And after that, confirm the changes. Now that we have a custom variable to store the page access token, we can now click the test request, map the response again, and then choose the access token on our response value, and this time under the custom variable, choose the page access token. Now, another very important step. we need to click the add button here, because if we don't click the add button, then our response map will not be registered on the HTTP request. So click the add button here, and as you can see, our response map is now registered, and we can now confirm the changes. This next step is optional. You can either do this or not do this, because on this optional step, what we're going to do is we're going to store the page ID value and your MMIO access token into our custom variable. So let's create another custom variable here. Right click and use the user input here and configure this. And we are going to create a new custom variable. And let's name this as my page ID for the Chuck's Burger. But here we are not going to set this value as dynamic. We are going to make this value as fixed or predefined. And then add the page ID here on the predefined value, because this page ID is not changing. So that's why we are setting it as fixed. Now let's confirm the changes. The next step would be to add another custom variable, and this time let's name this as my MMIO access token. And then same as the page ID, we are going to set this as fixed and add the MMIO access token on this field. So copy your API access token and go to your flow again and paste it here on your predefined value. Now let's confirm the changes. Then let's configure our HTTP request again, and here we are going to replace this with the custom variable that we have previously set. So go to custom variables and use the my page ID Chucks and add it here, and copy and relocate it on your URL. And as you can see, it is automatically transformed into a URL friendly format. So again, do not be surprised if the opening and closing curly brackets are replaced with these values. These values are simply representation of the opening and curly brackets to make these special characters URL friendly. Now, the next step is go to headers, and we are going to change the value here. Instead of adding your value there directly, we can use a custom variable and add it here and put it on your header value. In this case, your MMIO access token becomes a custom variable, and it's easy now to manage your page ID and custom variable. Then let's try to send a test request and map our response. And as you can see here, there is an access token value. Select this, and on the custom variables, select the page access token, add this, and then make sure that the response map value is registered already before you confirm the changes. Okay, we have the page access token. Next step is to publish this post inside our page. So to do that, add another HTTP request here and use the public API of Facebook. So Facebook's public API can be found here under developers.facebook.com, and a specific API that allows us to publish a post inside our page would be found in developers.facebook.com/docs/pages/publishing. And just scroll down until you see this portion. So as you can see, this is our request URL right here. And we should use post as our request type. So let's copy this request URL. Note that this request URL contains a line break or a space here. So this will not become a valid request URL. So let's format first this request URL. Let's just use Notepad to remove the line breaks. All right, this is a Notepad, then paste this here. And as you can see, there are line breaks here. So make sure that when you add your request URL, remove all of the line breaks so that it should be on one line only, like this one. So this is now a valid request URL. we can now copy this. We have already removed the line breaks and go to our flow. Now on this flow, let's configure this, add a post request as our request type, and then paste the request URL that we have formatted. And as you can see, we have a parameter keys here. So this is automatically added because Facebook have required this on the documentation. As you can see, when we copied this, it includes a parameter key like this one, message and access token. So this is why we need the page access token, because Facebook's Graph API needs this in order for our request to be accepted by Facebook's server. So don't worry about that because we have already configured the access token from our previous HTTP request. We can just reference that using custom variables. So on the access token parameter key, replace this one with the custom variable here. So open the custom variable and then add it. And you would notice that we have the custom variable here, copy and paste it here. The next step would be to replace the hello fans as the parameter value. So the value that we need here is the code custom variable. So open our custom variable and add the my code, and then just relocate the my code custom variable under the message parameter key. Great, we now have the correct parameter keys. So the message, we added the my code custom variable. For the access token, we added the access token custom variable. And now, another thing that we must take into account is the page ID variable here. So if you go to the publish content API, you would notice that the page ID value here is enclosed with the opening curly bracket and the closing curly bracket. This means that this is a variable. It means that we need to change this manually when we use that on our API. So I have shown you earlier that we have already saved the page ID on our custom variable. So what we need to do here is simply replace this page ID variable here with our custom variable. So click the custom variable link here. And after that, search for the my page ID custom variable because this is where we stored our page ID value. So choose this and then click add. And then we're going to cut this and put it on the variable here. So let's replace this with our own custom variable. So in this way, you don't need to manually add the page ID here on the URL because we already used the custom variable. Once the request is sent, it will automatically be transformed to the page ID value which we stored on the custom variable. Now let's click test request here, and then we are going to map the response. Click the map response button and we should be able to see the post ID right here. But the problem is we haven't created a custom variable to store the post ID. So that's why we should create one right now. So let's confirm the changes for now and then right click and then use the user input and then create a custom variable from here. And we're going to name this as my post ID and then confirm the changes. Great, we have created a custom variable with my post ID as the name. We can now delete the user input and we should now be able to store the post ID from the map response. So let's edit our custom variable and test the request again and then click the map response button. And as you can see here, we have an error message. This is not the same response that we got earlier. This is because we are posting the same post on our page. So Facebook does not allow posting the same content on our page multiple times. So in order for this to work, we need to delete the post that we made earlier because note that every time you send a test request, an actual request will be sent to Facebook and then it will be posted on our page. So if we go to our Facebook page and refresh it, we should be able to see the post that was posted earlier because of the testing. And now this is the post that we are talking about. So all you have to do is delete this post so that we can post it again. So delete the post. And after deleting the post, we can now go back to our flow and send a test request again, then store the post ID on our newly created custom variable. Now click test request, and then we are going to map our response again. And finally, we have the post ID, and this is the custom variable where we are going to store this response value. Remember to always click the add button here, because if you do not click the add button, then our value mapping will not be set. As you can see, there is no value mapping set yet on our HTTP request. That's why we have to click the add button. Now that we have added the add button, our value mapping is now registered on our HTTP request. We can now confirm the changes. Great, we now have a process to publish an inspirational quote to our Facebook page and also save that Facebook post ID on our custom variable. The last thing that we need to do here is send a message on Messenger with that Facebook post link. So it's really easy to do. So let's create another text element here and then configure that text element. And let's say, hi, first name, this is your Facebook post. And after that, let's add https facebook.com/ and go to custom variables, add the my post ID custom variable, and that's it. That's pretty much it. We can now confirm the changes and save, then send a test. To send a test, simply go back to Messenger and then type inspire me. Alright, we have received all of the responses, and as you can see, our process is working. So this is our quote, so much technology, so little talent, and this is our Facebook post. And if we go to this link, we will be redirected to the Facebook post, and it should have the same quote. And as you can see, this is the very exact same quote as the one that is sent to us on Messenger. So now I hope that you can see the power and the customizability that HTTP Element provides if you use this on your chatbot flows. And I hope you learned a lot on this lesson because that marks the end of this video. So let's have a little recap. What we did here is we sent a request to Quotable API, and then after that, we save the quote on a custom variable. The next is we sent that quote to Messenger using the myQuote custom variable inside of our text element. And after that, we retrieved the access token from our Facebook page data, and that Facebook page data can be accessed using the MMIO public API. What we retrieved was the access token of our page and stored that on the custom variable. And then we used that access token custom variable to send a post request to Facebook. And then we used the myQuote custom variable as the parameter value of the message parameter key, and then used the page access token as the parameter value for our access token parameter key. What this does is it will post the quote on our Facebook page. And after that, we will store the post ID on a custom variable. And the last step we did was we sent that post URL over to Messenger using the text element. We simply added the post ID over to https facebook.com, and that would serve as the post ID. And again, I hope you learned a lot on this lesson, and I encourage you to stay tuned for a more valuable educational videos for MMIO. So see you on our next video.